to go on, right? Okay, there you go. Hafaday, good evening to everybody. The Committee on Health, Economic Development, Homeland Security, and Senior Citizen convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were provided. First notice on Tuesday, January 26th, and second notice on Friday, January 29. For the record, today is Tuesday, February 2nd, and the time now is 6:05 p.m. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 165, an act to create the Guam Bureau of Health Planning and Development under the Office of the Governor and to transfer the Health Professional Licensing Office to the Bureau, establish special funds by adding a new Article 11 to Chapter 1, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated. I'd like to recognize the senators who are here with me this evening. To my right, Senator Mary Torres, thank you very much. Senator Tommy Morrison, and also Senator Jimmy Espadon, thank you very much for joining me this evening. If you wish to provide written or oral testimony, I ask you to please come to the table to my left here to sign in, and we'll call you as you sign in here. I just want to also state that for this bill, we've kind of did things a little differently. When we first introduced the bill, we had a public roundtable, and we had it here in the legislature a few months ago, and I see some of you who were here at that roundtable. And then we had stakeholder meetings. We had about maybe 3 or 4 stakeholder meetings, and we've developed a report from those meetings that was also provided to the stakeholders, and also will be provided to anyone else who wishes to receive a copy of that. Today, we're having the official public hearing for Bill 165 for it to move forward in the legislative process. I do intend to call another public roundtable markup meeting on this bill after today. So Pam, you got that? I said that, okay? So we want to make sure that that's on record. Just to ensure that those who perhaps could not make it this evening has another opportunity to provide their input to this. This is a very important piece of measure they would like to pursue. So I'd like to call up those who signed up to testify. Miss Carla Haddock, Miss Melissa Weibel, Mr. Marlon Larson, and Dr. Robert Underwood. It's represented by Margaret Hattori. I think we can also call Mr. Kevin Hatosis. Thank you very much. Just a brief background of what Bill 165 is. It's to establish the Guam Bureau of Health Planning and Development and to put it under the Office of the Governor. Health planning, an agency, is nothing new for Guam. We've actually had this established in our statute many years ago, I believe in the 1980s. However, when the federal funds that were funding this agency was gone, had run out, then parts of the Health Planning Bureau, some aspects of it were farmed out to other parts of the government. Some at DICID, some at Public Health, and other entities. And so we took a look at, and for the nurses here, I'd like the nurses to know that this was driven by one of the nurse pioneers, one of the first graduates of the UOG nursing program, Mrs. Laurie Duenas, who I think she's going to try to catch up with us a little later, who was with me about 3 years ago and put the framework of this legislation forward. And so this is what we have here today. It has evolved, from that time. But I anticipate that it also changing from this current form. And I know we're going to go through some of the concerns that the stakeholders have had. And I hear you. I'm going to hear you again tonight. And so we'll make those changes. But I think what's important is that we reestablish this Health Bureau and Planning function in our government. Healthcare has really expanded and become a real important part of our community, and having proper information, available to policymakers and also to the community is critical in ensuring that as we expand it even further, that we have the types of services that are truly needed in our community. And so we want to be able to, one of the 5 functions of this bill as introduced is the research and reports. The Bureau would be tasked with ensuring that anything health related is done and proper research is done and how it relates to our community. The second function is to ensure that it becomes the health data warehouse. Right now we have a lot of health agencies that have different functions and different grants that they do receive, different reports that they have, and it's not really in a centralized it's not in a warehouse. And this is one of the functions that we want to do, is make it a health data warehouse. The third, of course, is to have this bureau as the clearinghouse for all health grants. As I said, we have different agencies that go out and obtain grants, but I think if we put our collective efforts together, I think we'll be able to leverage some of these efforts. The fourth, which I know was from the get-go was a concern, is the function of the certificate of need. And even after our first roundtable, I've said that that's something that is something I'm willing to remove if need be. But I just want to make sure that it's clear that this wasn't put in there to make it where it's making it prohibitive for services to be able to be established in our community. It was more of a way to ensure that what is needed, that we go out and get what is truly needed for our people. The fifth function of the Bureau would be to house the Health Professional Licensing Office, which is right now currently placed within the Department of Public Health and Social Services, which is already under the purview of the Governor of Guam as executive branch. And I know also this has some concerns out there, and as we go along, we can answer some of those concerns. But it's not meant to be another layer of regulation for any of the boards. It's really, the intent here is to improve the functions of the HPLO and to provide the necessary attention that it needs and the support that it needs to carry out the functions of the different boards. So in a nutshell, that's the 5 components. And so now we'll go ahead and take your testimonies, and then if there's any questions, then we'll gladly answer that. Okay, we'll have Ms. Carla Haddock be the first one.
Today, I'm Carla Haddock, and I'm a registered nurse. While I agree that healthcare should remain a high priority for the government, the intent of this bill does not address the justification to transfer the health licensing offices under the Bureau of Health Planning and Development. I do not believe any professional licensing authority should be placed within the office of the governor. The integrity of the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners, GBNE, should be upheld and not subjected to any political pressure, and thus separate from the governor's office. Continuity is needed in the office, and this cannot be ensured with changes in administrations. Further, no other jurisdiction that I have researched, and I looked throughout the 50 states last night, has the licensing office for nurses under the governor's office. In fact, most boards, although under the state government, are operated solely on funds they receive from licensure. It is my hope that GBNE will function as such one day. I appear today to stand in opposition of this bill. This bill attempts to compile many important issues into a much too simplistic solution. Professional regulation and the issuance of licenses for elder homes, for example, should not be combined and put under the purview of the Office of the Governor. Medical studies should not be conducted by the Office of the Governor, but by the divisions of the executive branch that conduct the health services. As an example, it is mandated that nurses receive a review of their salaries tri-annually, but they were specifically excluded from the Hayes studies, and our salaries are well below the national average. In the legislative attempt, the last goal was to develop a repository of health data and be the clearinghouse for all grants. Such an entity exists already under the governor's office, the Guam Clearinghouse. Such a duplication of services is not needed. There is also a concern when transferring the staff of the licensing office, as exemplified by Bill 222. The governor's office and the legislative branch are in disagreement over this, and the staff should not be created into unclassified employees and subject to such debate. In addition, was written notification given to the various licensing boards and their employees, informing them of proposed reorganization as mandated by 5 GCA Chapter 11, subsection 1110(1). During the stakeholders' meetings regarding this bill, the issue of transferring the licensing procedure seemed to be not necessarily that licensing boards were not functioning properly. Rather, the issue has to do more of funding. Resources are not adequately given. Therefore, it is merely a budget problem and not an administrative problem, and the transferring of licensure does none of us any good. GBNE is allocated approximately $40,000 per year to run their office, yet they collect well over that amount in licensing fees. The fees, as you know, are deposited in the GovGuam General Fund. Our executive director has graciously served many different roles and has not been able to concentrate just on her duties of GBNE. Our board members have not been compensated the stipends they are owed to them as functioning government board for the past 5 years, although they continue to serve because of the love for their profession. Perhaps what is really needed is legislation to create a special fund for the various licensing entities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haddock. Margaret?
I'll read the testimony of the President. Dear Senator Rodriguez, thank you for your continuing work on health issues and the provision of health care on Guam. The University of Guam is eager to work with you and all of the healthcare agencies on the island, as well as the newly envisioned Guam Bureau of Health Planning and Development as proposed by Bill 33-165. We plan on coordinating our activities with the general direction of Guam's healthcare agencies. As you know, the university competes for funding for health-related education and research grants from a number of federal agencies, from the National Institutes of Health to the Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Education. These present themselves on the basis of federal initiatives and priorities and are targeted at educational agencies. We trust that the ability to apply and receive these grants directly will not be impeded by this legislation and instead facilitated. We assume that this will continue to be the case should this legislation pass into law. I will be happy to brief you or your staff on this concern. Sincerely, Robert A. Underwood, President.
Thank you very much. I love how that's a huge
visual impairment.
Kevin?
Can I give my testimony?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez. My name is Margaret Hattori Uchima, and I am the current Dean of the University of Guam School of Nursing and Health Sciences, and present this testimony as a professional, speaking from my perspective as a licensed registered nurse. I've been an RN since 1985 and view the privilege of licensure as a serious matter. I've been licensed in 2 states and have received my Guam license in 2000 when I relocated here from California. I served as the vice chairperson for the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners from 2003 through 2011. I was also a member of the task force on the revision of the nursing rules and regulations, which were approved by the legislature in 2008. Thank you for including my nursing colleagues and I during the planning phases of this bill. I support your efforts to improve the healthcare system on the island, and thank you for your ongoing commitment. You have been an advocate for nursing issues and a supporter of nursing education. I'm concerned with 2 components of this legislation. The first is the relocation of the Health Professional Licensing Office from DPHSS to the jurisdiction of the Guam Bureau of Health Planning and Development. The licensing board must maintain independence and freedom from political interference. To retain the trust of the public and the professionals under the purview of the licensing board, there must be no appearance of political influence. While that is not the intent of the legislation, it is a concern that I feel must be addressed. As a board member, I worked hard to make fair and objective decisions based on the facts presented. I would like to see that the atmosphere of professional autonomy be preserved and encouraged. My second area I will speak to is the language on page 12, which gives the exclusive purview of all federal grants and programs to the GBHPD. And that wording is on line 14, where the Bureau will have exclusive purview at the Guam level over all federal aid programs, grants, loans, contracts, contributions, appropriations, advances, direct federal development, and other federal funding sources for the government of Guam, and exclusively serve as a clearinghouse for health-related grants, and so on. My only concern is that the School of Nursing and Health Sciences does administer several important grants. And as the President spoke to UOG's numerous grants, and these are large dollar amounts that we're talking about, we've been able to successfully compete and manage these grants. And I just hope that this bill would not hinder our current operations nor affect our ability to continue to compete and receive federal grant monies. And my only last suggestion, and I mentioned this during the first session that we had, was just the membership of the Coordinating Council on page 13. The membership, I'm sorry, it's on the last line, shall include, this is the Guam Health Coordinating Council, shall include representation from the business, labor, and healthcare providers. I just would like to add that I think because you are looking broadly at health, if you added a professional, someone from the health professional education sector, such as UOG or GCC, that might assist in future planning because of the healthcare workforce issues. Thank you very much for your time and consideration and for including us in this very important legislation.
Great. Thank you very much, Margaret. Mr. Haitosis? Dr. Haitosis?
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez. I'd like to take this opportunity to testify on Bill 165. My name is Dr. Kevin Hitosis. I'm a primary care nurse practitioner, member of the Guam Nurses Association, and president of the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners. The Guam Board of Nurse Examiners' mission is to protect the public health and safety by ensuring that licensed nurses practice according to their scope, based on professional standards. For many years, the Guam Nurse Regulatory Board has done its best without compensation to ensure that nurse applicants are qualified and are competent to practice, educational programs are regulated, and that they produce knowledgeable and proficient nurse aides, licensed practical nurses, and registered nurses for the workforce. And allegations for misconduct are evaluated and actions are taken against violations of practice. The Health Professional Licensing Office has been hampered by those abilities to allow us to make decisive decisions in a timely manner. The office is understaffed and has operated with a very limited budget for many years. To this day, funds are critically needed to support positions for nurse administrator, legal counsel, investigator, and office assistants. On occasion, underqualified workers and volunteers have staffed the licensing office, and as a consequence, inefficiencies have affected timely decisions for licenses of nurses, ultimately causing delays to fill critical positions in our local clinics and hospitals. Bill 165 seeks to establish special funds to support the operation of the Health Professional Licensing Office under the newly created Guam Bureau of Health Planning and Development under the Office of the Governor. While I agree that a budget is urgently needed to adequately fund operations and functions of the HPLO, I'm not convinced that moving the Health Professional Licensing Office is the answer to the problem. Moving the HPLO from the Department of Public Health raises concerns that special interests will place more influence over Nurse Regulatory Board decisions. And in my position as president and experience in the past, issues arise where individuals outside the board try to exert pressure to facilitate decisions or even bypass GBNE review. Non-professional opinions and influence on nurse scope of practice and licensure have harmful consequences on the safety and welfare of the public. The Nurse Regulatory Board must continue to function independently without the influence of special interest. I therefore oppose this bill and urge you to consider the same. I thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Melissa?
Hi, I'm Melissa Weibel. I'm also a registered nurse, but I'm not actually coming to this meeting as a registered nurse, but as the administrator for the Guam Surgery Center. I think that they've spoken very eloquently about their concerns, but I also noted that inside the stakeholders' remarks that all of those things were included as well, so I know that that's already well documented. For me, I'm here in favor of having the Health Bureau put together and reorganizing some of those things that have been taken away from that and kind of parceled out throughout the community and bringing those under one roof. I think that's a good idea, and I think the ability to bring specialists in different areas together to house that bureau is a good idea. For me, the only thing that I wanted to stipulate, and that's also in the stakeholders' paperwork, is that we need an auditing arm on this island desperately. There is nobody checking to make sure that evidence-based practice is occurring, that people are meeting standards of care, that clinics are being adequately audited for, what kind of providers are here. Are you doing your credentialing accurately? Those types of things are typically done by the states. They have offices that take care of that, and the federal government just assumes that that's going to occur. They don't have the people either to send out here to be audited, and I'm a primary example of that. I've been on island since 2010. My organization was reviewed in 2009, and we have not been reviewed since. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a huge gaping hole that should be filled. We should all be striving to do our best every day. And while we might be trying to do that, we're going to miss things. That's why we have auditors come in to make sure that those things that we're missing get addressed. So I'm in favor of this bill. I know that there's items that are going to be addressed after this meeting, and I appreciate the fact that you've pulled all these things together. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we go on, I just want to thank you again, just like I did the first time you came and you said what you said, because I think it's honorable coming from a provider saying, look, we need to be audited, we need to be watched to ensure that we're doing what is good for the community. So I want to just thank you for that. It speaks volumes of what the Surgery Center is providing to our community. So thank you. Mr. Larson?
Yeah, Senator Rodriguez and other senators, you're the only one I'd met before. I'm Marlon Larson from Oregon, and I should say I'm not a registered voter on Guam, so if that's disclosure. But I have some experiences in Oregon that I would like to share with you constructively. And first of all, I would say I'm very much in favor of your bill, and I read it over the last couple of days that Chuck passed along to me, and I think it has many good and the helpful features that will bring those kinds of improvements in healthcare structure to Guam. In Oregon, I started working some with the State Health Planning and Development Agency when it came to implementing mobile CT. And the original fast CTs that came out from General Electric, 79, 80, 1981, they were like $1 million machines. And at that time, the certificate of need threshold was $250,000. What it had forced hospitals to do then, and other providers, is anything above $250,000, it forced them to try to enter into collaborative and negotiated, sharing of expensive technology, and with the goal of both making it more cost effective through better utilization and this sort of thing, rather than every single hospital buying the latest machine, because there'll probably be another one in 2 years. Like at that time, we thought MRI was going to just make CT obsolete. Well, that didn't happen, and still hasn't. So, but anyway, what I worked with in the early 80s then was forming a medical service management company, providing the supervision, the financials, and other things for then joint ventures. And I've been involved in helping found and manage and finance and business plan 79 joint ventures altogether. More than 50 of them are healthcare related. Some of the others are medical office, real estate and things. 7 of them are now here running services on Guam, including my sidekick, Melissa, who we're real proud of the, let's say, of what she has brought to the surgery center in terms of her experience, her other, I told her today she multitasks beautifully, So all the nurses coming to her with things and discharge questions and all that. So she's handling all that, and I occasionally interrupt her. Phone call interrupts her on the computer. Okay, back on point though. Among those joint ventures were 2 mobile CTs, 7 mobile MRIs, 4 mobile lithotripters for breaking up kidney stones. One of which we brought here to Guam a couple of years ago, and Melissa's working to implement it as a much less invasive method to resolve a kidney stone. And a lot of kidney stones grow in the kidney big enough that you cannot get them out with other techniques, and to be able to avoid open surgery of a ureter or a kidney, which can be a 7-8 day in-hospital event for a patient, the lithotripter treat them for an hour, tell them to drink a lot of fluids, and they go home in 2 or 3 hours. And so it was just a revolutionary machine, and again, the health planning system helped, ensure we had as many as 16 different hospitals, using these on a scheduled basis. So the urologist would manage the patient for a couple of weeks. They could be scheduled out that far and then resolve their stone. The other part that I'd like to share with you is one in which I had met with you and your staff and Chuck on a couple, 3 years ago. And that is the Oregon Health Plan in the mid-90s applied for and received a Medicaid waiver. And what this was, it was a waiver from all the structured requirements that come out of Washington, D.C., and instead it was a program that was kind of funded starting in 95 as almost kind of a pilot program experiment. And basically what it was is the funds to take care of the welfare folks were coming from Washington, D.C. to Oregon, and then it was a direct contract of a group of 120 physicians that we helped organize that would take that responsibility on. And it was take on the responsibility for their hospitalization, lab tests, physician, primary care, specialty care, and so forth. And I'll say the management company that I had started many years ago has been paying the providers now for 21 years who deliver the service on that. I think another disclosure I want to say is, but in any case, the Oregon Health Plan it has now in Douglas County grown to about 25,000 patients out of 100,000. So it's 25% of people's health care are funded through this. And again, the Affordable Care Act, did have some effect on it, but, let's say in some ways it enhanced it and made more people eligible, for example. But originally under it, whereas we had about 6,000 patients covered by Medicaid in Douglas County, and instead those funds were, let's say, able to cover 12,000 patients with a more basic program. And so, I think when you consider not only the Medicaid one, but the MIP and so forth, I think that that type of a system and encouraging another manifestation of the states that you well know here is to have the coordinated care organization. So they have really, let's say, put a lot of encouragement on formation of those, and I think there's 12 of them in Oregon that kind of cover different regions. So in summary, I'll say I'm very much in favor of and supportive of your bill, and I really wish the legislature and the people of Guam good luck, working in the implementation of an improvement like that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, sir. And although you're not a registered voter here, you contribute immensely to our community here. We want to thank you for that. And so your testimony here this evening, I know you're just visiting, it means a lot to us. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad the timing fit in. Come over for the annual meeting of the surgery center,
That's right.
which is tomorrow afternoon. So anyway.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any of my colleagues have any questions for this panel? Senator Espadon?
I do, but I'm not sure I've formulated it in my mind just yet. I understand what the first two speakers with Carla and Margaret were saying. I think really I took interest in particularly Mr. Larson's testimony in trying to understand. I mean, you gave some good examples of the coordination of I guess equipment when you started talking about mobile CTs and mobile MRIs and whatnot. But then you were talking about 16 hotels. On Guam, it's a whole different reality. We have one public, hospitals. We have one public hospital and one private hospital. And so I was just trying to understand, how does this bill, since you've read it several times, and I've read it only 2 times, I'll be real honest with you, and I still don't fully comprehend it, but how does this bill and the organization and the moving of the whole, and in creating the creation of the whole new bureau, how would that fall into the examples that you just kind of, or how would that assist that you kind of put forth?
Well, the 2 ways that I tried to, let's say, describe our experience with were the sharing of expensive equipment. And for example, what we were, let's say, able to do is get high technology imaging equipment, surgical lasers and so forth, shared among different communities geographically that probably wouldn't have had the incentive or the, let's say, financial wherewithal to just see it. And so, like one example I mentioned, the lithotripter. The original lithotripters in states, it was approved by the FDA in about 1986.
Yes, sir.
And then there was a lithotripter in San Francisco, and there was one in Seattle. And so patients that did have a stone blockage and quite painful, as I'm sure you've had friends and others, they were then either do an open surgery, which became quickly like virtually unethical. It wasn't prohibited, but to have a urologist do open surgery when he could send that patient to Seattle, have another urologist do this lithotripter procedure.
I understand. I guess the question I'm trying to get to is, does this hamper in any way the private sector initiative to go in to perhaps purchasing the kind of machinery? Again, you work at the surgery center with Dr. Berg, I would imagine, or at least some of the docs down there, right? And he's been very progressive in the machines that he brings in, and he's had to do it with really no real oversight from any specific bureau. Bottom line, as a physician, he recognized the need for the kind of services that this island requires, and so it was by his own private initiative that he brought them in and has become very successful and has contributed greatly to this island. And I think what I'm hearing from some of the others is that now if we start putting this under the governor's office of who gets to come in and who doesn't, who has to talk to who and who doesn't get to talk to anybody, there may be some political interference in terms of the private initiatives, the initiatives of the private sector to bring in the kind of health care that it's needed on this island. And I'm just trying to figure out where do your examples fit into that whole concern that's being raised right now?
Okay, well, on the sharing of expensive equipment aspect, the parallel I'd make here on Guam is years and years ago there was an MRI up by GMH, which has been shuttered for 10 years now. Okay, and then Dr. Berg at GRC, he established a high field Siemens MRI, and so now in the last couple of years, there's been 2 more MRIs come to Island as investments in the $2 to $3.5 million range, because it is just the machine. It's like you got to have a radio RF shielded room. You've got to have fairly expensive specialized personnel, technologists and so forth to run it and all that. So I'm kind of saying that whereas one mobile MRI was meeting the needs of the medical community, now there's 3, and each of them are, incurring the costs of well over $100,000 a year for maintenance contract, cryogens from the company that manufactures them,
Right.
maintenance. A lot of times the technicians have to come if the machine breaks down, like from Philippines or Hong Kong.
And I understand. I'm very familiar with the healthcare field, Mr.
Okay.
Larson, and so I do understand what you're saying. However, I still don't understand how that would hamper the competitive nature of the industry itself. In other words, okay, so if there are 3 MRIs on this island, whereas there used to be 1 and it didn't do too well, or for whatever reason, in fact, I kind of know the reason, but I won't even state it, it would seem to me that, at least in terms of economic logic, that the more competition you have, the lower the price will go. And anybody who actually is willing to put out an expenditure of several $1 million just to provide the machine has done their homework to say that, okay, the island can sustain the services that we're going to provide regardless that there's 2 or 3 other providers on this island. In other words, they saw the need, they saw the market share, and if they were wrong, then that's a burden that they have to bear. But I'm not sure how the centralization of this bureau under the governor's office would actually effectuate that.
Well,
And I think, Mr. Larson, and I think, Senator, that's a discussion that I think we can have on the floor, because it is something that's part of the bill, and if it does reach the floor with that certificate of need, I think that's the issue you have.
And
with
I
that
appreciate that,
process.
Senator. I just respect Mr. Larson's input, because you can tell that he's been in this industry a long time and he's seen a lot of systems. And in fact, just for full disclosure myself, my parents were both in the medical field for the longest time on this island. I was in charge of medical facilities for a very large private clinic on this island as well. So I do understand. But I was just trying to pick your brain, because when you stated that you read this and then gave the examples how it might be to fit in, I was trying to figure out where that fit was, that I could try to understand that this would be a good thing going forward.
Well, I think another way to express that, and sorry it wasn't more precise and eloquent, is, okay, it's too late to let's say, be involved in more sharing and planning about MRI on
Yes,
Guam.
sir. Yes, sir.
However, what is the $5 or $6 or $7 million next magic machine that's going to come along that will be super robotic surgery, so that some highly skilled surgeon in Moscow is doing surgery on a patient here in Guam on a $7 million machine?
And you're right.
And then are we
We don't
going to
know.
want GMH having one and GRMC and
Right.
maybe somebody else,
I appreciate that, Mr. Larson. I really do. And I wasn't trying to grill you to try to make
No,
an argument. I was just trying to understand.
I appreciate both your insight and your question to stimulate further discussion about it.
I think it would have been a good discussion. We could even have more discussions past this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Larson.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator. Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Morrison? Great. Thank you. So I just have a question for Carla and for Kevin. I know that, and it's been documented in the stakeholder report, and also I had opened up earlier about the concerns that I realize are there about perhaps moving the HPLO office to the bureau under the governor's office. First, we just all need to realize and be clear that already, as part of the executive branch, the licensing office is already under the purview of the governor, who's the head of the executive branch. Number two, the boards that operate out of the licensing office are all appointed by the governor already. And so and so the intent was never, and maybe that's maybe I was being very naive, right? Is that the intent is not to have that type of political interference. Really, it was more of to ensuring that it gets the support and the assistance it needs. Having the direct oversight under the governor's office. And so those are the two things I wanted to make very clear. And so I don't know. I know that was a component that you've mentioned that you have a concern about, and therefore oppose the bill. So if as I had suggested earlier when I first opened, that perhaps if this is removed, this portion, it was two portions that I know that there was concern, which is this and the certificate of need. If those two portions were removed, is the other functions of the bill, the intent of the bill, still something that is that you or your organization oppose? Maybe Kevin, we can have you answer first.
Thank you, Senator. As a regulator for licensing, it's very important that when cases come before us that we're objective as much as possible, and we get timely data on cases to make good decisions. And sometimes it happens that there are external forces that can influence us, and this bill, to me, is confusing. We have many loaded concerns that are in it, and some of which are influenced by private industry and entrepreneurship and things like that, which ultimately calls into question qualified individuals who need to be hired for such positions, which if under this bureau, which houses the regulatory boards, can presumably be influenced in some way or another. And that's what really concerns me. The Guam Board of Nurse Examiner does a very good job with limited resources to try to make objective decisions. And we enjoy that independence from these influences so that we can come out objective with such decisions. So.
Okay, great. Carla?
With GBNE, I really want to be forward-thinking. It is my goal and my intent further down the road that GBNE actually be a standalone board. And I understand they're under DPHSS, which is under the governor, but I think this puts it closer under the office of the governor. And like Kevin said, I think that the issue of outside influences is a huge concern. I think what our big concern is, which kind of addresses in here, is just giving more budget and more monies and fiscal allocations to the HPLO, and that part is needed. So I agree with that, but I don't think it needs to be within this bill. It should be its own separate bill. And my other concern is we're up for license renewals pretty soon again, and do we really want to be implementing all of these changes right when our licensure is about to come in, and the potential there to totally revamp even the board members and the staffing, and I just don't think now is the time to do any of that.
Okay, so this does not, and we'll always be cognizant of that, if we're moving forward with that, right, and ensure that doesn't impede or hamper the process of licensure and the renewals. I think the other aspect of, and I agree, perhaps if we do this as a separate standalone, and separating it, I still believe it's what we have to do, because I don't believe it's just the budget or the allocation. If you look at the individuals who are there now, they do their best to do the work that they have in front of them, but this is their collateral duties. The work that they do there now, they have a main function. They're their first function, right, of what they're there for, public health. And so, moving it out of public health was something that we have envisioned that would improve not just the administrative, but also the autonomy. We were looking at removing it from the whole the budget allocation of public health itself, because it was collateral. It is a stepchild of public health. And so that's why the vision was to remove it, have it under this bureau where the functions were kind of in line as a health as a health entity, right? But I hear your concerns. And as I said earlier, this part at least was not part of the original development of this legislation, which I'm happy she's joined us here now, Ms. Lori Duenas, and so she's here. But so that wasn't part of it. I recognize that, but it's an attempt to try to fix the problem, which I'm sure the nursing and other disciplines who are here know the difficulties of the licensing office. Okay, so again, thank you very much, and we'll ensure that we take this into consideration as we move forward with this bill. Okay, thank you very much. We have Mr. Please, yes, thank you. Yes, please. Mr. Michael Cornwall. And if there's anyone else that wishes to testify, we have no Ms. Duenas. Anyone else, you can please come up. I don't have any other one listed here, so if you can just state your name and who you represent.
Oh, my name is Michael Cornwell. I'm a registered nurse. I've been in the health services since 1973 as a corpsman, became a nurse, or a registered nurse, in 1982, and have served in the Mariana Islands for over 30 years, both in Saipan and on Guam. Thank you. I really appreciate hearing this first, because I want to address first the issue of auditing. I thought that was really important, and yet we're saying we won't give the nursing board, who are the experts in nursing care, the money to be able to audit the care that's being done on Guam. But we're going to form another organization full of all of other peoples with a lot of other interests, mostly profit, to be the ones to oversee that. I think that it doesn't make sense at all. I do agree with one thought, and it was to have a health plan, and I think that needs to be separate from this and say, what is our health plan for Guam? We are a laboratory here. We're a small island. And we have to ask ourselves, do we value profit more than people or not? Right now, and this bill seems to be saying we value profit more than people. And the things we've done, we have a private hospital not asked for, given $170 million something in tax rebates and all these things. And if you don't have insurance, you pay more for health care than if you have insurance, and all of these things indicate very clearly that we value profit more than people. But the line that scares me the most is on page 4. The purpose, so as not to negatively impact Guam healthcare industry. And to me, that's what this whole bill is about. It's about control over the healthcare industry in Guam. That's the sole purpose of this in its essence. So I just wanted to make that, and I oppose it strongly, but I think the idea of coming up with a healthcare plan for Guam and asking ourselves, does everyone here deserve healthcare? Because if you can't afford it, you don't take the pills. You don't go see the doctor who says, I want a $200 deposit before we'll say hello to you or take your blood pressure. So I think having a plan and asking, what is the principle that this plan is founded on, is the most important thing to do. And just want to thank you very much for allowing me to say those things. I just got this morning. I did read through it, but there's a whole lot of things. And the other thing it kind of reminded me, and I thought Carla kind of said it well, this is kind of really rambling. It kind of covers everything in healthcare. But when you do something like that, the whole point is to have control over healthcare. And the people who have vested interest will be on that thing. They will have control over a certain amount of authority, certainly purse strings, as you've written in here, over, for instance, licensing boards. And so you have employers and employees who are all on this same board, and I don't see that being a safe situation. And for a health plan, just one other idea, because I've always felt this was important. I think the government of Guam should educate at least 10 physicians and 20 nurses every year for the next 5 to 10 years if we're really concerned about having enough providers on island. Nursing schools running 4 years, medical schools running 4 years. You have to come back here and work for 4 years. And I think that would solve our issue of primary care, certainly for everyone on the island. Though I could certainly make an advocate for advanced practice nurses as well to do that. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your listening.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Ms. Lori Duenas, earlier I just want to say, because you weren't here yet, I want to thank you again because you were really the one who helped in developing the framework. And that was about 4 years ago. And so it has evolved. It has other components, which we've heard and we've discussed, is well documented in the reports that that we have issued based on the stakeholder discussions on the HPLO. But all the other functions of this bill that we had worked together on are intact, and we're hoping that can still be preserved as we move forward. Okay, so again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dennis Rodriguez, Chairman of the Committee on Health, Economic Development, Homeland Security, and Senior Citizens, and the Honorable Senators. I'm sorry for being late because I just came from teaching health planning and development course at the University of Guam. My name is Lauren Flores Duenas, a Guam registered nurse since 1968. After 30 years of government service, I retired as the administrator of the Bureau of Family Health and Nursing Services in the Department of Public Health and Social Services, and I served in the Board of Nursing as chair and member for 9 years. I am now an adjunct faculty at the University of Guam teaching health service administration courses. I come before you to voice my support for Bill number 16533, but also some concerns that I have, especially with the provisions on the licensing board. Though I participated in the writing of this legislation, I am concerned with the addition of the licensure because the intent of creating a health planning and development agency was just that. And the Guam Bureau of Health Planning and Development, as originally envisioned in this legislation and as mandated previously in federal and local statute, will exist as a bureau within the Office of the Governor, where it will be able to work with, collaborate, and coordinate with the Bureau of Planning and Statistics, and ultimately with the Governor of Guam and all other agencies of the executive branch. This is in keeping with the provision of the Organic Act of Guam, which places ultimate authority and responsibility over the health and welfare of this community in the Governor of Guam. I note that there is a clear distinction between Governor of Guam and Government of Guam. In consonance with the intent and the spirit of the National Health Planning and Resources Development Act, which gave rise to the creation of the Bureau of Health Planning and Development, and through various permutations of the same intent and purposes in Public Laws 14-150, 20-200, and 24-92, and several executive orders, the Guam legislature sees and acknowledges the desirability of a deliberate and focused mechanism to oversee health planning for Guam. For this, as a healthcare professional, I commend and thank you. This legislation, at its initial writing, was focused simply on creating an agency which would work with the governor, the executive branch agencies, and Guam's healthcare providers to harness the capacity, talent, skills, and motivation already existing in our community towards the development of comprehensive, achievable, and sustainable healthcare systems and objectives. As the state clearinghouse for federal grants, the governor's office could provide access to a multitude of federal resources, financial and otherwise, which will be valuable resources in this effort. I'm going to skip along and not really read all of it, but I will submit a written testimony. I would like to see that the language on the sections that involve the licensure board be reviewed and really studied before we jump into something like this. And I agree with the licensing board and the nursing, is that you do this in the middle, because health planning is right now going to be working at trying to establish itself and to create. And I don't see any provision for funding. And I know that that's why Guam, the Guam health planning before didn't go very well, because there was no funding transferred when it went to the Bureau of Planning. And so I feel that there should be a language that includes funding, not a budget, but at least a certain amount that's going to get them started, and they will be able to operate. I wish to thank you for permitting me the time to express and support of this bill, and that the languages that I mentioned be reconsidered. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Duenas. Ms. Crisostomo?
My name is Sybil Crisostomo. I'm a speech pathologist. I've been appointed to the board to represent speech pathology for 3 or 4 times. I've been here since 1976. I've worked everywhere. And I enjoy being on the board because I want to help protect the public, and that's what the board is really there for. And in order for us to protect the public, we do need an autonomous agency, and I think it should be under the governor. And we also need to restructure our fees. We need to restructure our application system and get it on the website. We've tried this, but we have not had any success. I don't know if it's because, it's just so much. And I know that the people at the board, working at the board, are just up to their hairs in trying to get everything all squared away with all the licensee applications that come in and renewals that come in. And it's a very stringent look at people because we want to get high quality people who are really going to benefit the people of Guam. And I just think it would be better done if we were an autonomous agency, that the fundings would stay within that autonomous agency, and that we would be able to have a full-time lawyer, and if we needed to. And I just think it would be a good move to do that to help protect the public. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Mr. Pareto?
Thank you. Good evening, Senators. Senator Rodriguez, Senator Torres, Senator Morrison, and Senator Espaldon. My name is Vince Pareda. I'm a clinical social worker by profession, and I've been a clinical professional for well over 30 years. I've worked in the government of Guam for about 28 years, retired, worked in mental health, worked for the courts as well as for the Department of Youth Affairs during my Guam career. And then I worked for the Navy as well as for the Department of Veterans Affairs for another 20 years. So I'm a dual retiree of the federal government as well as government of Guam. I presently work for the court as a contract counselor to assist the court in the programs that they're offering. And in addition to that, I'm currently on the Board of Allied Health Examiners. I serve as the secretary and the representative for the professional counselors that are licensed by that board. So I've served on the Guam Board of Allied Health for many years. I was this last appointment I was appointed by Governor Camacho, and I've served on the board ever since. And over the course of my service on the board, I have to admit that we've encountered a lot of problems in the operations of the Health Professional Licensing Board, specifically the Guam Board of Allied Health. As you know, it's the board that licenses probably the most disciplines of all the boards. The Guam Board of Allied Health licenses the chiropractors, the veterinarians, podiatrists, physician's assistants, the counselors, acupuncturists, and that's just a few. And in addition to that, the Guam legislature last year passed a new law that licensed that provided licensing for 3 new licensures, and this is the professional counselors. So we now have a law that was passed in July 2015, which licenses 3 professional counselors: the licensed professional counselor, the licensed mental health counselor, and the licensed marriage and family therapist license. So we're quite busy, and over the years I've noticed that this board has never, or the HPLO office overall, has never really received the support and resources it really needs to efficiently operate. You know, we do our best with the limited resources that we have, but we don't have access to funding, because all the funding that's paid by licensing fees, either renewals or new licensing, is not available to the boards for our expenditure. We have to ask, because I believe those funds go to the general fund. So we don't have a separate funding that's exclusive for the operations of the boards. And so whenever we need funding, we always have to ask, and you know how that goes. So it's when this law bill was developed, I initially saw it as a positive thing, because I really believe that removing the board from public health and allowing it to become more autonomous and allow it to have more resources would benefit the boards as a whole, because we're not talking about one board, we're talking about several boards, you know, all of the boards that operate under HPLO. So I'm here to offer support and encouragement that direction take place, because I see that as only an improvement rather than continue to struggle the way we've been struggling all these past years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And again, thank you all of you for your testimony. We will have another public markup on this to ensure that others who weren't here tonight will have another opportunity to provide their input. But at that time, too, we will provide a version that would have the recommended changes to this bill, the changes, that a version that will be reported out of committee. And so you'll have the opportunity before we call that meeting to get a copy, so you can review it and have time to, develop your comments and feedback.
Mr. Chairman?
All right? Yes.
If I may ask a question?
Sure. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Cornwall, I'm going to have a conversation. I'm sorry, Michael Cornwall. Yes, I'm going to have a conversation outside of this meeting because... I'm sorry? I had Daisy McGett. But no, it was, and I have to excuse myself. I needed to talk to the gentleman who just left, but I missed your testimony, and I'll probably have a conversation with you on the side. But Vince and Sybil, is it? I hope you don't mind calling you by your first name. Your basic concept is saying that you kind of support this legislation because, in your view, the agency or the licensing board should be autonomous. Is that kind of am I on point on the point that you were making? That you're saying as long as the board's going to be that's what you really would like to see, that it has its own funding source, or that it has its own funding, a sufficient amount of funding, and that you're autonomous from probably public health or wherever. Is that a good representation of what I just thought I heard you say?
Basically, but my point was that any move or any measure that's intended to offer greater support and financial support for the operations of the board would be better than what we're doing right now.
Okay, so you're just basically agreeing with the previous panel that was there, who basically said the same thing, that the real issue is funding to be able to operate. That's the real key for this.
Yeah, plus other resources that the boards don't have, that are not available to the board, that we often have to ask or beg to get these services. For example, if we're entertaining a complaint against a licensee, for example, and that requires an investigation, well, the board doesn't have an investigation on that's employed by the HPLO, we generally have to ask the AG's office to send one of their investigators to assist in the investigation of a case. So that's an example of where we lack that resource.
Okay. Well, and then I would imagine that, and I'm trying to tie it into this legislation, because this legislation puts all of that under the governor's office. And we've heard some kind of, maybe not, right, type of feedback. And I'm just trying to understand the real issues that you bring, that the whole profession brings in terms of this legislation, just to give it a fair hearing. And Ms. Crisostomo?
Yes, we've tried for years under public health, and it's not the director's fault. It's just, it's not the director's fault. He's tried to help us as much as he can, and it's not just about money.
Okay.
It's about protecting the public and being able to do that fairly, concisely, and without dragging things out forever and ever, making it more convenient for the licensees to apply and renew. All of those things need to be put in place, and they're not in place, and they haven't been in place for many years.
Okay.
So it's not just about funding.
Okay, and I would imagine that because of these challenges and difficulties that you recognize that the board has and the profession has, that anything is better than what you are now. So
No.
going over. Okay. Okay.
No, I don't agree with
Well,
that.
okay. Let me qualify that then. Bringing it over to the governor's office and then making it a bureau within the governor's office would be better than the way you operate now. That's what this legislation is proposing.
I believe so.
Okay.
And I believe also, because we're tied into the Organic Act, we're appointed by the governor, that that's where we should be.
Okay. And I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Senator Morrison? Sorry, Senator Torres, did you have any questions? Okay, so just Mr. Cornwall, right? Or Miguel? Miguel. I wasn't going to ask again, but I'm kind of bothered by your testimony earlier about you don't agree that this Health Planning and Development Bureau would, or with a statement that that this bureau will not, the efforts will not negatively impact Guam's healthcare industry.
That what?
That you directed us to page 4.
Right, that's the purpose, so as not to negatively impact Guam's healthcare industry.
So I want to just understand how would this bureau?
Because go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I think you understand my question.
Yeah. Because I see the bureau. This is a control issue, and now we want a bureau that will control all of healthcare here, and its purpose is so as not to negatively impact Guam's healthcare industry. Mm-hmm. That's all our private clinics, that's our private hospital, and all of this sort of thing. You don't see anything wrong with that statement? That's a scary statement to me.
Yeah, I
power
don't follow
in a good hand to control healthcare on Guam. That's what this is doing.
But how would the planning and the development, the further expansion of the healthcare industry, how is that controlling? How is that controlling
No,
the
you're
providers?
saying that the purpose of this is to not negatively
That's
impact
right.
Guam's healthcare industry.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Correct, right.
So and you don't agree with that statement?
I don't think it's a balanced statement whatsoever. And I think how do you define Guam's healthcare industry? Maybe you have a different definition than I do. To me, it's for profit. Our industry here now is for profit. Healthcare used to always, in the past it was first do no harm. Now our motto is your money or your life. That's the reality of our healthcare system in the United States. And this says let's protect that. We're going to protect that, and we're going to further the power and control of that, because that's the purpose of this board.
Okay.
Is that kind of clarified?
No, it's not. But I want to invite you when we do have our markup, so that at least we can really just clear that up at least, and clarify it even further. And we would,
But
if we get your contact information,
Yeah.
we'll provide you the report that we had from our stakeholder sessions, which we had a couple, and some of the concerns that were addressed this evening are documented in that, and perhaps you can see what the kind of background that this effort has went through, and then from there, when we come back, then we'll have further discussion on that. Okay, ma'am, you have a closing?
Am I able to comment on that statement?
Please do.
Having been on the board is not trying to control the healthcare system. The board is trying to get qualified people to work on Guam. And we want the best people. We don't want people who have been in trouble all in the States and then this is a last resort. We really want to, and so we want to get high quality people. High quality people will do the right thing for healthcare. So in that statement, I disagree.
I'd like to respond to that because I was on the Guam Board of Nursing Examiners for a number of years too, and totally agree with that. But that's not what this is about.
Okay, and so if we could, because we will in the next conversation. Very good. Okay, great. Well, thank you. Really, I want to thank you all, Miguel, and to everybody else here. I want to thank you for your participation on this. This is really a very important. This effort is very important, and so that's why we've taken the time. We've done what we've done over the past few months, and we're going to continue to do to get as much as we could, the input and the participation of all of you. So we'll make sure that we'll make that announcement. But once we have revised this and give you a copy that I would like to be able to report out of my committee. Okay, so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Those who wish to submit written testimony can do so. They can do so by email to my office, deliver it here in the legislature, or deliver it to my office. The time now is 7:16. This hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.